I read recently that AI is less about robots replacing humans and more about robotics acting as personal assistants to workers. Clodagh, I know you've been sharing some really exciting stuff that IBM have been doing with robotics in interesting sectors like child toys and old age care.
To date, we've used computers very effectively to enhance and accelerate human performance, whether that's speeding up calculation at the most basic level, recording things more efficiently, or whatever it might be. And the next generation, which is cognitive computing, is going to do that all the more than ever before. I think it's important to distinguish between robots and computing, because advances in robotics are very different from advances in computing. And whilst we can put cognitive computing into humanoid robots, that's not to suggest that we're getting the level of dexterity, for example, in robotics that we're seeing in terms of intellectual advances that we're getting with cognitive and computers. So a lot of people confuse this when they start to look at how much computerization or robotization will affect the workforce, how many jobs we might lose as a result. And we've got to be quite clear that the jobs that will be lost as a result of automation, which we've been doing for a long time, that will be accelerated with cognitive, because increasingly we'll be able to afford to do things electronically that won't need people to do them. But that's not to suggest that there will therefore be less jobs. There's a lot of research to indicate that all the while that we've been adding technology to our lives for the last 100 years, indeed, unemployment figures are lower than ever in most countries because they create work. One study recently suggested that creation of 1 million robots creates 3 million jobs, right? So let's put that aside for a minute, because it's not about whether or not there'll be jobs, it's about the type of things that computers can do for us. And cognitive computing is helping us advance for the sake of the workforce, not just the jobs that people will do, but let's look from an HR perspective. There's two different things that cognitive can do for HR. On the one hand, and this is what we've been saying all along, is the challenge for HR. On the one hand, it can make it more efficient and optimize its response to the workforce. Increasingly, in all walks of life, we're using cognitive computing to increase or improve customer experience, customization to individual customers, because that allows for a greater market share to be gained, right? So if we can understand whether that started with a simple thing like Amazon recommending what book I might read, that goes down to now I want to order trainers that are personalized to me and stuff like that. All the analytics that we can run through cognitive systems help us to personalize things for customers in the moment. And similarly, we can personalize HR to individual employees in the moment. So on the one hand, we can have cognitive systems that are doing what may have been legacy done by operational teams, might be processing queries that are typically policy related and that sort of thing. That obviously the likes of Watson can do quite easily, can be taught to do quite easily. But then there's the more complex piece, which is to actually help people optimize their personal experience at work. And that's about understanding who they are, what they're capable of, what opportunities exist in the organization, and what others like them have done in the past. And over time, as that base of knowledge builds, we can actually have extremely pragmatic performance optimization interventions for people, because we can do just-in-time learning with learning interventions that we know will work because other people have found them useful. We can ascertain which of our learning interventions result in performance improvements and which don't, so we can optimize what we have available. And similarly, we can understand people at an innate level about how they feel about things, as well as the external sort of perspective on how they've performed. And the bigger the amount of data that we have in that respect, the more we understand each individual, the more we can optimize their ability to perform, which will increase their experience of mastery, which will enrich their sense of purpose and indeed their engagement and likely their productivity.